lies, the money, we're in this together and through it all. They said that nothing's forever, and they refuse to see the change in me. Why won't they wake up? Come on, come on, come on. Let's get out of the mood to my music. Play that fucking music. Live through my music, yeah.
Welcome back to Reliving the War, the show where we compare WWF Raw to WCW Nitro in order to find out which show was the best on a particular week. Last week I asked you guys if you wanted me to skip forward and look at landmark episodes of both Raw and Nitro instead of going week by week, and I want to thank everyone who reached out to give feedback. It's very clear to me that people would like Reliving the War to keep going forward as a week to week show. You all seem happy enough with how the series is progressing, so that's exactly what I'll do. We'll keep things the way they are. Again, thank you for letting me know. I want to make this series the absolute best it can be, and I can only do that with your support and feedback. So, as a recap, we have looked at the first 4 times Raw and Nitro went head to head in 1995. I've been scoring both shows based on how entertained I was during head to head segments, and so far Nitro is in the overall lead with 2 points, Raw has 1 point, and we have also had a tie. When scoring the shows, I play Raw and Nitro against each other and decide who had the best matches and who had the best segments. It's all personal opinion here, so you're encouraged to comment and let me know what you thought of Raw and Nitro. Also, as the show is now going to remain weekly, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this series. It just means you won't miss out on any episodes going forward. Finally, I've put together a playlist on YouTube that will get updated weekly to include the latest Reliving the War episodes. I'll leave a link in the description. Okay, let's get started. It's October 9th, 1995. Raw is still presenting matches and promos from the Grand Rapids tapings from back on the 25th of September, while Nitro is live from Chicago this week. The WWF are still building towards the In Your House 4 pay-per-view, headlined by WWF Champion Diesel vs Davey Boy Smith, and WCW are gearing towards Halloween Havoc 95, a pay-per-view featuring The Giant taking on Hulk Hogan in a monster truck match and a WCW Championship match afterwards. Now, when I loaded both of these shows up, I instantly noticed a problem. Nitro has around 8 segments and Raw only has 4. Nitro has a total of 4 matches, while Raw only has 2. This will be an issue from time to time. Nitro tried to jam-pack as much content as possible into their weekly Nitro broadcasts, while the WWF were stretching out their pre-taped shows to last for around a month. It's just the way it is. That being said, 2 weeks ago I felt Nitro tried to put too much stuff into one show and it ended up hurting the entire broadcast. So less can definitely mean more here when comparing these 2 wrestling shows. If WCW rushes these matches, the show could end up disappointing, but let's find out. We said at the start that we will compare shows head to head, and that's exactly what we'll continue to do. Let's start things off with Nitro then. Eric Bischoff, Bobby Heenan and Steve McMichael are wearing Chicago Bears colours. Chicago was getting ready to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Bears winning the Super Bowl, so the commentary team were doing a little bit of pandering here. While Bobby Heenan was letting us know that Hulk Hogan was in the arena, Sting made an appearance. The Stinger said he would sort out the differences between Lex Luger and Randy Savage later in the show, but first, the US champion has a match. We transition right into the first WCW Nitro bout of the evening, the Stinger versus the Shark. Sting was using his Man Called Sting theme music here during this time period, and while I prefer the theme he used during the early 90s, the audience still gets on their feet when they hear the beginning of the Stinger's music. Poor John Tenta was lumbered with this shark gimmick here, but still, let's see how he fared against one of the cornerstones of World Championship Wrestling. The Shark started things off as the aggressor, not allowing the Stinger to get situated at all. all. After a few chops, an elbow drop and a leg drop, Sting was able to make the comeback, hitting 2 stinger splashes and a crossbody, 1, 2, 3, and it's over. I'm being honest here, that was pretty much the whole match, bell to bell. It went for about a minute and 15 seconds. Yes, I do agree, it was always a pleasure to see Sting in WCW. I said the exact same thing 3 weeks ago, just seeing Sting is the attraction after all. But this match here really meant absolutely nothing on the grand scheme of things. If you missed this match, you missed nothing but the chance to see Sting. It's not a great performance either, to be honest, but anyway, it is what it is. It's a quick match, it's over, let's move on with Nitro. We are shown some clips from last week, Hulk Hogan losing his Fu Manchu at the hands of the Taskmaster and the Giant. Screen grabs or footage of Hogan getting shaved would have sufficed here, but WCW decided to give this recap more time than the Sting vs Shark match. We are then told that the next match on Nitro will feature Sabu taking on Mr. JL, better known as Jerry Lynn, so a real opportunity here for WCW to swing things around. This hasn't been a great start to the show after all, in my opinion anyway. Sabu versus Mr. JL was everything you would expect really. Sabu performed his springboard moves to excite the audience, and Jerry Lynn was also able to get in some high-flying offense too. The audience, strangely, began chanting "Hogan sucks" in the opening minutes of the match. There must have been a few die-hard ECW supporters in attendance here for sure. This match here then went on for around 4.5 minutes. It was much more competitive than the Sting match, but at the same time, it was also very by the numbers. Sabu didn't really change up much of his offense, to be fair. As unique as it was, a Sabu match was always a Sabu match, if that makes sense. Still, a good showing here. Sabu picks up the win with the camel clutch. Okay, let's flip over to Raw and see if the WWF can top what WCW just put out on Nitro. Raw is starting things off with the huge 6-man tag match featuring some of the company's top stars. The Undertaker, Diesel and Shawn Michaels taking on Owen Hart, Davey Boy Smith and Yokozuna. This could be a case of the WWF shooting the load a little early here, but let's find out. The match starts off with Owen Hart and Shawn Michaels providing some fast-paced action. Things quickly break down when all 6 men enter the ring, but this gives Diesel and The Undertaker a chance to pull off some double-team offense on Yokozuna. The British Bulldog and Diesel are then presented with an opportunity to give fans a taste of their upcoming In Your House match, and then The Undertaker and Yokozuna get in the ring to square off. Great pacing here, everyone is getting a chance to shine. It's quick tag after quick tag and nobody is overstaying their welcome in the ring. Shawn ends up getting trapped. He needs to make a tag, but the heels won't let HBK get to his corner. We then see Dean Douglas make an appearance at the entranceway, taking notes on Shawn Michaels, his opponent at the upcoming In Your House show. The match then slows down completely as Shawn struggles to get into his corner for that tag, but eventually HBK tags Diesel, the roof comes off the arena momentarily, but Davey Boy Smith is able to hit the running power slam on Big Daddy Cool. The Undertaker breaks up the pin attempt, but this allows Yokozuna to come in, hit Diesel with the leg drop and allow Davey Boy Smith to pin Diesel. 1, 2, 3 and it's over. The heels just beat the babyfaces and it was quite clean too. After the match, Mabel showed up to help Yokozuna attack The Undertaker and Dean Douglas also managed to sneak up on HBK to launch an attack. The Undertaker took a beating in the ring and in storyline, this would lead to The Undertaker wearing his infamous Phantom of the Opera mask. The match ends with all the babyfaces laid out, beaten and bruised. So who had the best initial 20 minutes or so between Raw and Nitro? I'm going to go with Raw here. There was a lot more structure to the opening of the WWF show. The match itself was good with everyone getting a chance to shine in the spotlight, and the WWF also managed to progress 3 pay-per-view matches in a single Raw bout. I enjoyed seeing Sting, but it was too brief, and while Sabu vs Jerry Lynn was absolutely fine, it was also quite predictable. So Raw gets the first point. I think WCW Nitro was up for an easy point next. The WWF decided to show a ton of SummerSlam footage while Nitro presented a promo and a match over the next 10 minutes or so. Let's flip over to Nitro first. The Stinger and Lex Luger are in the ring with Mean Gene Okerlund, and Sting wants Lex to sort out his differences with the Macho Man Randy Savage. The Stinger calls Savage to the ring, Randy Savage comes out, and Sting says that both Savage and Luger need to settle their differences once and for all in the ring, even though they just had a match last week. But anyway, Sting says that if Randy Savage can beat Kamala at Halloween Havoc, and if Luger wins his match against Meng, then Savage and Luger should square off at Halloween Havoc to put an end to this feud. Both men agree, and just as a quick side note, Kamala ended up getting replaced by the Zodiac at the pay-per-view. The segment ends, no issues here. We then see a limo pulling up to the arena as Eric Bischoff announces that a new competitor has made his way from Japan to WCW because he wanted to play with the big boys. The limo opens up and it's Chris Benoit. Back in the arena, we have Big Bubba taking on Road Warrior Hawk, and before the match, Disco Inferno is back at the entranceway dancing away to his theme music. Bubba and Hawk look like they're about to attack Disco Inferno, but they think better of it. The match gets underway. I was impressed with how agile Big Bubba still was at this point in his career, and Road Warrior Hawk pulled off a tremendous power slam on the big man, but not even a minute into the match, Disco Inferno shows up on the ring apron. Road Warrior Hawk attacks Disco, leading to a count-out victory for Big Bubba at the 1.5 minute mark. This, I feel, is going to be an ongoing issue with Monday Nitro here. A lot of people have commented on these videos saying that the WCW undercard was leagues above the WWF's, and therefore Nitro is going to be a clear weekly winner. While that may be the case, having your undercard go out and perform for under 1.5 minutes isn't the best way to showcase talent. I also understand that having a 60-minute wrestling show puts an incredible limit on things, but decisions should be made in regards to the show's format and schedule. WCW could easily take out some promos and replays that could be easily discussed on commentary in order to present more fulfilling matches. You'd think that Nitro completely shit the bed with what they put out here, and they did, but the WWF was arguably worse. Over on Raw, the WWF decided to replay a huge portion of the Bret Hart vs Isaac Yankem match from SummerSlam 95. I don't mind pay-per-view clips that help us catch up on things, or even pay-per-view clips that are actually fun to watch, but someone in the WWF thought that putting on a huge part of a mediocre pay-per-view match would somehow make fans stay with Raw, simply banking on Bret Hart here to bring in viewers. 10 minutes of TV time was used to show us last week's attack on Bret Hart and highlights from the SummerSlam match, and I just think it was a bad decision on the grand scheme of things. While Nitro didn't exactly set the world on fire with their last segments and matches, at least it was something new. Nothing more to say here, Nitro gets the point. During the SummerSlam replay, it was announced that the steel cage match between Bret Hart and Isaac Yankem will take place next week on Raw, and if Jerry Lawler interferes, he will be put in his own personal cage for the remainder of the match. Next up on Raw, we have Skip of the Body Donnas taking on Make a Difference Fatu. This would be one of many gimmick changes for the future Rikishi over the years. This one here was one of his least successful attempts at portraying a new character, but still, let's see how the match went. Honestly, this one wasn't bad at all for two guys who didn't have any sort of story or angle going into the match. Fatu done a little bit of dancing around the ring, and Skip hurt himself a few times when he tried to lay in some offense, but the action in the ring was solid enough here, and there's nothing to really bring up as bad points. The match ended when Skip tried to superplex Fatu, but he didn't have the strength to do so. Fatu delivered a top rope splash, and the match was over at around the 6-minute mark. A decent match, no complaints at all. What's a bit more shocking is that this was your final match for this episode of Raw. Flipping over to Nitro, we have another Hulk Hogan promo. This one should be fun though. What's he going to say about losing his trademark mustache? We get a little look into the future here when Hogan makes his way to the ring wearing all black. Why was Hogan wearing black? Did losing his mustache make Hulk Hogan succumb to the dark side? Well, yes, it did. Hogan said that he now knows how the Taskmaster and the Giant operate, and in order to get on the same level as his Halloween Havoc opponent, he decided to dress head to toe in black. I wish I was joking. Hogan comes off as kinda heelish here, but he can't help talking and acting like the same old Hulk Hogan. The fans again can be heard booing Hulk, but not because he's trying to act like a heel. They're just booing him because it's Hulk Hogan. Hogan took jabs at Vince McMahon here, saying he took the little Hulksters out of New York because the promoter there was getting a big ego, and now in WCW, the Giant wants to put an end to Hulkamania, something Hogan won't let happen. Hogan calls out the Giant. The whole Dungeon of Doom shows up outside in a monster truck. The Hulkster says he's going to go out and find the heel faction, and the segment is over. Keep in mind, we wouldn't see Hogan nor the Dungeon of Doom for the remainder of the show. I'm calling this one a draw and awarding both Nitro and Raw a point here, not because both shows put on stellar television, but because I really can't decide which was better. The Hogan promo was interesting, seeing him in the black gear for the first time, but it was a little silly also. There was no payoff for the segment, and it felt like an excuse to show off a monster truck on Nitro. The match on Raw wasn't spectacular, but it was decent. Fatu and Skip gelled pretty well together in the ring, and while it's one of those matches that's been totally forgotten and had no consequence at all, it was still better than any match Nitro had aired up until this point. So yeah, each segment had their own merits and their own downfalls, so it's a point to each. Sticking with Nitro, we have our main event, Ric Flair vs Arn Anderson in a steel cage. I really enjoyed this match last week, so hopefully lightning can strike twice and we'll get another good performance here. Just like last week, Flair and Anderson wasted absolutely no time at all going after each other. As Eric Bischoff announced on the headset, that WCW Nitro brings pay-per-view caliber matches to weekly television. The two men in the ring bounced from one side of the cage to the other, absolutely no letting up here, and just like last week, neither man truly got the upper hand throughout the entire bout. Ric Flair was on top form here too. Right from his entrance, he displayed a great amount of intensity that lasted throughout the entire match. And I know intensity and Ric Flair aren't two things that usually go hand in hand, but watch it back for yourself. Flair is right back on his feet after taking bumps or delivering moves, strutting and shouting and getting ready for the next sequence in no time at all. This was decent here, but what's a bit jarring about the whole thing is that it's over in under 5 minutes, and this feels really strange because it's a cage match. Normally a cage match is given a fair amount of time to tell a story of two men locked inside with no escape, but that didn't happen here unfortunately. What we got here was decent, not as good as last week's main event, but still alright considering the time restraints. Brian Pillman showed up, but Flair was able to knock him off the side of the cage. When the Nature Boy went for the figure 4, Arn was able to take out what looked like brass knucks, hitting Flair on the head and scoring the pinfall win. After the match, Flair announced he would face Pillman and Anderson in a handicap match next week on Nitro. Flair said he would try to find a partner, but if he turns up empty-handed next week, he will still wrestle a 2-on-1 match. This main event was okay. I don't want to harp on about short matches on Nitro because it will be a consistent observation in the coming weeks and months, but Nitro as a whole suffered here again because they tried to stuff too many segments into one show. Last week, Nitro got it right by placing a limit on unnecessary promos, but this week they overdid it once again. In saying this, Raw had the opposite problem this week. The WWF didn't have enough content to carry the show forward. After the Skip vs Fatu match, we see Doc Hendrix outside Diesel's locker room. Doc says he tried to get an interview with Taker, Shawn and Diesel, but they were too beat up to talk. We then go to Jim Ross, who's in Davey Boy Smith's locker room, and man, Jim Cornette is there to completely carry this segment. Jim talks about how the British Bulldog has been denied his chance to become the WWF Champion throughout his entire career, but at the upcoming In Your House show, Davey Boy Smith will defeat Big Daddy Cool Diesel, just like he did earlier on Raw, and the Bulldog will finally become WWF Champion. I know Jim has his fair share of enemies these days, but this man was an asset to the WWF. He had an incredible ability where he could talk at lightning speed while remaining articulate and witty. The WWF lacked promo guys during this time period. Cornette made up for it. I thought Davey Boy Smith was just going to stand around and play with his baseball cap, but Davey also had a few words for Diesel, pretty much repeating what Cornette already said, but still, he done well here. Mabel then joined in, saying he will take care of The Undertaker at In Your House, and that's pretty much it. The last few minutes were used to hype next week's steel cage match between Bret Hart and Isaac Yankem. Nitro gets the point here. Promos can always defeat matches here on Reliving the War, and it's already happened, but the cage match was much better than what the WWF presented here. Jim Cornette was good, but it wasn't good enough to save things. Well, if I'm honest, I felt both shows weren't great this week in comparison to last week, but let's tally up the scores. The WWF 6-man tag was better than both Sting vs The Shark and Sabu vs Mr. JL combined. I felt WCW really rushed through their opening match, and while the Sabu match was absolutely fine, the WWF 6-man tag was simply better. The WWF phoned it in with a SummerSlam recap that lasted nearly 10 minutes, while WCW gave us a Sting promo and an extremely short match pitting Big Bubba against Road Warrior Hawk. Nitro took the point here. Hulk Hogan's promo on Nitro was interesting. It was strange seeing this shift in character from the Hulkster, but the whole thing came across as a little cheesy. Fatu vs Skip was a fine mid-card match that didn't really lead to anything at all. I couldn't decide which was better here, so both Raw and Nitro got the point. Finally, WCW put on a cage match to end Nitro, and I think this was better than the Jim Cornette promo. Nitro wins this episode of Reliving the War. Neither show was great, to be honest. The 6-man tag on Raw was the match of the week, but the WWF shot itself in the foot with the long SummerSlam recap. Nitro had too much going on and nothing got a chance to simmer. It's hard to recommend either show, but when compared head to head, Nitro gets my vote this week. Our overall scores then are 3 points to Nitro, 1 point to Raw, and we have 1 tie. In the weekly TV ratings, it was another draw. Both Raw and Nitro garnered a 2.6 rating. Thanks for watching, guys, and remember to subscribe if you want to keep joining me in Reliving the War. Next week we have the steel cage match pitting Bret Hart vs Isaac Yankem, and we also have Ric Flair battling Arn Anderson and Brian Pillman. Will the Nature Boy find himself a tag team partner? Will Jerry Lawler try to interfere in Bret Hart's match? Join me next week to find out. Again, thank you for watching.